Welcome back to the show, Calvin Cheng.
From now on, every election is the PAPs to lose. If any party wants to challenge them, they need to challenge them right now.
Right.
My problem is that they announce the electorate boundaries too late. It's not fair. As active citizenry, we need to check the government within the period of its term and not only exercise our democratic right once every 5 years.
From starting his business career in modelling to becoming a nominated MP, our guest today is a key figure in Singapore's political discourse. Whether it's influencing policies or, as he put it, being both a political and central influence, one thing's for sure, he knows how to grab attention. So to kick off our coverage of the upcoming general elections, please welcome back to the show, Calvin Cheng.
Hey!
Welcome back, central influencer.
You got see his scoff or not?
To which part?
Right after the modelling part, he just...
No, so because one thing I noticed, right, in your Wikipedia page, by the way, did you write it yourself?
No. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen that f***ing ugly picture. That's kind of the best proof that I didn't write it.
You can just change the picture, you know, right?
I've got no idea how to do it.
I can help you do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, as you know, elections are happening this year. And so, to help prime ourselves and our audiences for G2025, we're going to spend some time speaking to candidates of both aisles as well as thought leaders in the space.
Okay,
so, we thought let's have a chat about what we're seeing, what we're expecting.
Right.
And also, just a quick word. So, a lot of people are saying that we're government mouthpiece. So, don't be mouthpiece with us. So, unless it's merited.
We're trying to shed that. We're trying to shed this government mouthpiece thing.
Okay, so before we jump
frank.
into elections,
Yes.
you have appeared in the news recently.
Yes.
Wonder if you can share a little bit more about
as
that.
I was telling you before, anything that is currently going is sub judice, so I cannot discuss it. So the only thing I can discuss is that 3 of the plaintiffs were struck off. I really pity the judge because they were struck off because they self-identified as a bunch of clowns.
Yeah.
So there was a
Dude,
whole...
that post was so hilarious, your Facebook post.
There was a whole... So she spent a lot of time writing about the definition of a bunch of clowns and why they cannot self-identify as a bunch of clowns. So
Yeah.
professional, of course, but I think it's a waste of time and we shouldn't give them any more attention.
And with that, we will move on.
Yes.
Let's start super broad first, okay? What are your big predictions or projections, if any?
I think from now on, every election is the PAPs to lose.
Yep.
Okay.
Because in a first-past post-Westminster system, to have one party have over 90% of the seats is an anomaly. So I think it is kind of inevitable that there would be 2 dominant parties. And I think the reason for the current and previous anomaly was Lee Kuan Yew and his generation of pioneer leaders because of what they did, right? They brought Singapore from third world to first world. There was still a certain cachet to that generation. But it's an anomaly. So it's not going to hold. So I think every time the credible opposition, and I'm very specific about that because, the broad term,
Very broad spectrum.
feels a credible candidate, I think the electorate will give them a chance. What's interesting would also be that which is going to be the second party. I think now it looks very likely to be the Workers' Party. If any party wants to challenge them, they need to challenge them right now. Because once the second party gets into that dominant position as the second party, in the first past the post system, there cannot be a third. It's almost unlikely for there to be a third party.
Right.
Because you look at the Lib Dems.
The Lib Dems are probably kingmakers in a hung parliament.
Yeah.
But other than that, they become the third choice.
So you're saying that for that second party, they have to build that credibility very fast. What does that look like? Does it look like in terms of position, ideology?
So I think that the PAP has set the benchmark. A certain professionalism, incorruptibility, competence these benchmarks need to be met, which is very good for Singapore, right? In terms of positioning in a first past the post Westminster system, the votes tend to congregate around the center.
Yep.
It's very different from the American system. So because you have the primaries, you take a very extreme position first within your own party. So then you win in the center of your party, which is extreme compared to the center of the entire electorate. And then when you are running for the general election, you try to come back to the center. But that means that society becomes a lot more polarized. The electorate becomes more polarized. But in the first past the post Westminster system, in order to win, you have to congregate around a central position. So the electorate will punish you if you take an extreme party, an extreme position to the left or to the right.
In terms of what people are looking out for when it comes to say speeches or rallies or manifestos, right? What do you think are the main issues that people are looking out for?
I think all over the world, bread and butter issues are always most important. So cost of living would be topmost of people's minds. And I think if you look at survey after survey, not only of Singapore, right, of New Zealand, of the UK, America. The last 3 more significant elections, the incumbents were all thrown out because of cost of living issues.
So because of that, do you think PAP may suffer a lot more because of that?
They will, but it depends on timing. If you look at the American election, when Democrats were running, Biden kept saying that, hey, inflation has come down, which is true. By the time they were running, inflation had come down. But it's not the point of time that people feel. They feel that 2 or 3 years before that, right? So, for example, core inflation has come down to 0.8%, but people are not going to feel that at the moment. They're going to remember, that prices were going up. They suffered from inflation. They remember the GST increases. So in my opinion, the longer they wait, the better chance they have, because then you're going to feel the effects of lower inflation.
So I think something that was quite interesting is that we saw in G 2020, PAP won about, I think, 60% of the popular vote, which was down from 2015, which was almost close to 70%.
Yeah. So again, I think 2015 was an anomaly. So because of Lee Kuan Yew's death, there was a sympathy vote. It was our 50th anniversary, stuff like that. So I think 70% is an anomaly. It's beyond a landslide in most Westminster systems, right? So in general, we have to get used to the fact that ever since the boycott of Barisan Socialists, from that election onwards, every election has been, in the study of voting patterns globally, has been anomalous.
I want to focus on something specific, right? So the GRC that had the closest margin, which also led to 2 members of PSP getting NCMP seats, was at West Coast GRC.
I made that GRC. It was very shocking for me.
What is the feeling? What is the feeling of suddenly realize, oh no?
I said, what the fuck, right? I went to sleep, I woke up and I said, this is crazy. I nearly ended up in an opposition ward.
We've seen obviously the Iswaran case, and that was the GRC that he won. Do you think that will hurt PAP in that GRC?
Yeah, I think so. Minister Iswaran, regardless of what has happened, he was a very likable person, right? He has charisma. People liked him, right? So it probably would hurt the PAP GRC. But on the other hand, Desmond Lee is like Teflon, right? So he doesn't have scandals.
It's like Teflon,
right? It's like
I've never heard that expression.
Nothing sticks to him.
It's like a non-stick pen,
right? So it's like you don't have anything bad to say about him. Right? So,
but you don't have much to say about him. I think that's his problem.
Yeah, so you don't have anything much good to say about him. But in modern politics, it's more important not to have anything bad to say about you, right? Yeah. So which is why I can never run, right?
Okay.
So,
but then let's bring it back to the first point you made. This is the time for a secondary opposition party to stake their place.
Yes, that is very difficult, right? Because each party has its own brand, has its own manifesto, has its own principles. So I think the idea of a opposition unity is very naive, right? Because firstly, everyone stands for different things. And secondly, we are a discerning electorate. We want to have a choice, right? We want to see that there's a difference between these parties. But I think we are in such early days of the second party arising. Right now, I think you are correct that PSP seems to be the only possible challenger to the Workers' Party, and they seem to be staking a claim in a geographical area that Workers' Party are not staking a claim on. So I don't think we have that worry at that moment. For me, I think it's very clear-cut right now that the Workers' Party are the leading candidate for the second party, right? So I think the jury is still out whether the PSP can sustain, partly because they seem to be very reliant on the persona of Tan Cheng Bock, right? So very similar to the old STP.
Right.
Cham
Si Tong, right? What's his new party called? PPP?
No, not
PS.
Not PPP.
I don't know. I'm so confused.
One of the abbreviations.
Again, it was so much reliant on Cham Si Tong's personality that once he left, the party fell apart. Whereas Lau Tia Kiang has very successfully handed over the baton to a new generation. So I think they stand a very good chance. I know that people think that I am very pro PAP, pro establishment, but I do wish that the Workers' Party didn't make those mistakes that it made, because it really set themselves back.
I mean, for every mistake they made, the PAP made one. But the problem is that they're so small that every mistake they make is a larger percentage.
They are at, like in business, I'm a business person, when you're a startup, your mistakes are a lot more costly, right?
Do you think those mistakes will cost them this election?
People will be a bit more forgiving to them, because other side of the coin of being a startup is that, people give you a chance, right? It's going to cost them a little bit, but there's a fundamental instinct in all human beings about fairness. We don't like dominance. We don't like monopolies. I think they will cut the Workers' Party some slack.
An easy target for opposition is to say that the electoral boundaries are frequently reduced drawn to favor PAP? Like, what do you say to those who cry gerrymandering?
Gerrymandering can only work if you know the science of psephology, which is the study of votes. And gerrymandering normally works when you have certain demographics that cluster. Psephologically, you know that these certain demographics will vote a certain way. So, for example, in America, there are black neighborhoods, there are white neighborhoods. In the UK, there are working class neighborhoods, there are middle class neighborhoods. But in Singapore, because of our very intentional policy of mixing, we do not have these demographic clusters. So, because we do not have these demographic clusters, it's almost impossible to gerrymander, right? Because you cannot draw the constituencies in a certain way where you know for sure that they are more likely to vote in a certain way because of the demographics. Countries that can gerrymander means that they have enclaves. And I spent a lot of time in Europe, and one of the biggest problems for Europe right now are these enclaves where the immigrants come, the refugees come, they don't actually integrate. A society that is integrated and does not have these enclaves and is not susceptible to gerrymandering is a very healthy society. That means that our electorate is uniform, is uniformly spread out, and people mix, and we have friends of all demographics, and that's good for Singapore. So actually, if you say that gerrymandering happens in Singapore, I'll be very worried. That means that we live in a society that gerrymandering is possible.
I would think it's possible. It's possible to dilute an opposition one, no?
Not in the way that you can do it in the West. Just because this constituency voted a certain direction in the previous election, if you merge it with another constituency that voted in the other direction, that means that in the next election they will vote in that direction. But you don't know that because psephology doesn't work on voting patterns from one election. It looks at the demographic trends across a period of time. That you know that a certain demographic would tend to vote in a certain way, not just the results from one event.
I take respectfully issue with some of the points you made. First, when you put it like that the EIP and the CMIO system completely neuter the possibility of gerrymander, I disagree because SES is a way more important quantifier of people. I think I classify myself based on my SES rather than my race. And when I vote, I think about that more.
So HDB has very intentionally built housing estates in a certain way that the various SESs are mixed. You have 2 bedrooms, you have 3 bedrooms, you have 4 bedrooms, you have 5 bedrooms. It's not perfect, but it is actually a very intentional objective of HDB. As a Singaporean, we want all SESs to mix. And I think what HDB is trying to do is a very noble thing. As long as HDB succeeds, it makes gerrymandering harder and harder. And we want HDB to succeed. We're all right, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I align with you on that. That.
I think maybe not gerrymandering per se, but I think people do have certain issues or criticisms about the way the boundaries.
I tell you what I have a problem with. It's not with gerrymandering. My problem is that they announced the electorate boundaries too late.
Exactly.
It's not fair. The PAP, the incumbent, because they have so many people, because the incumbent, they have the human resources to be spread out across the entire island. So they're always walking the ground anyway. But if you are a small opposition party, you don't have that economies of scale. You actually want to know what the electoral boundaries are so that you know that you are actually walking the right ground, so to speak.
Do you think a potential solution to this is not redrawing the boundaries every election? Because as I think government has said this before, that Singapore's society doesn't change that often, doesn't shift.
But I think the numbers do shift. So I think there was a Straits Times article that just came out to say that I think Potong Pasir has expanded by a lot, and some other constituencies have shrunk. So I think the numbers do change
every election.
If the numbers change by a lot.
I actually think opposite in the sense whereby I think it should be stated every year. Not just on election year. So let's redraw it every year as and when we need to. Because the thing is that Singapore's reclaiming land and then we are so dense. So if we build one neighborhood, we literally jam 50,000 people in one place.
But I think how we do it is not as important as the fundamental principle that it should be done with enough time for all political parties to have enough time to walk.
Is it not strange to a certain extent that we are expected to vote along the lines of like our neighborhood upkeep?
Like every general election year, suddenly the HDBs will be painted and like...
No, I mean, not that. Because at some point when we look at, we're voting our representatives go in parliament, speak for us, cool, I get that. Right? But there's also this narrative of how we take care of your neighborhood.
Okay, so that's municipal responsibilities of members of parliament. I think this is not unique to Singapore. So all members of parliament are not only representative, but also responsible for how their constituency is looked after, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's not a bad thing, because for me, if you cannot even run a town council, how can you run a country? So I think it's a good way for a political party that aims to replace the incumbent to actually cut its teeth, right? You're running a country in a microcosm, right? So you're trying to balance the budget, you're trying to make sure that enough taxes are collected. You are training yourself how to manage an area of Singapore. And I think it's a good thing that our members of parliament learn how to manage a smaller geography before they are entrusted with the task of managing the entire country.
I feel like to an extent I can get behind having more opposition voices in parliament, but I do want PAP MPs to take care of the municipal issues in my neighborhood, because they do have economies of scale, and I do recognize the fact that it's not the job of the incumbent to help opposition. It's not their job.
So this again comes down to our political system, where in order to be a member of the executive, you need to be a representative. Whereas in America, it is actually separated. If you're a representative, you're a representative. You have an executive, you are an executive. So it's just a facet of our political system. But if it comes down to what you are saying, then the logical conclusion would be the NCMP system, right? So they are representing without having to manage the constituency, which is not what people want, right? People actually want members of parliament, opposition members of parliament, to have skin in the game.
Right.
They want them to be actually responsible for their day-to-day lives. Not just talk on their behalf.
The last thing that I'll just spend on in terms of the electoral boundaries, maybe for those who are not members of the intelligentsia, a very common criticism is how come the boundaries are like this, right? Punggol, Pasir Ris, or how come Ang Mo Kio so big? It stretches all the way to like Sengkang.
I personally think, I do not know why they do it. I think that GRCs should be kept to members of 3, because I do believe that the intentions of having minority representation is noble and it's the right intention. But there's actually no reason for them to go beyond 3, right? Because 3 is the minimum. So why have 4 or 5? Or we used to have 6, right? Do we have 6 before?
Yeah, we have 6.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit absurd. I've said that in my post as well, that you should keep all GRCs to 3. There's no logical reason to go beyond 3.
Yeah, because the common criticism as well is that a lot of unknown faces get parachuted in or get absorbed in.
Yeah, and now it's become a double-edged sword. So in the past, it was the strongest link. A minister will enable a newbie to ride on his coattails. But now it seems to be the weakest link. Someone in the GRC is messed up. You're going to vote the entire GRC out. They don't care whether it's a minister or speaker or whatever. Yeah. We've seen it happen in the last 2 or 3 elections.
So just to move this on with I think the role of media, right? And this debate has been very, very, it's been perennial. For the longest time, people have debated whether there was a need for politicians to appear on TV. And I think that's even more so now with the rise of TikTok, where we have politicians, MPs creating TikTok accounts, doing dances, and almost for entertainment content. Do you think this is a good thing because it helps bring out those who are politically apathetic, to bring them into the foray?
So I don't like to deal with what ought to be. I like to deal with what is.
Okay.
Right? So I think it's just the way society is, right? So they have to adapt. Politicians in general have 2 big responsibilities. One of them is to execute and to manage things. But the other one is to actually galvanize society. You have to be a good entertainer. It's the ability to rouse people, to the ability to be an orator. So Lee Kuan Yew had both, right? He was a good executive, a good manager, but he could also speak. You might have the right policy, but if you cannot get the whole population to follow you, how can you execute? Yeah. So in the founding days of Singapore, there were a couple of policies that were so controversial, like NS, for example. How do you convince mothers to give you your sons? When you went up there and said, trust me with your sons, I'll make sure that this is part of it. And people trusted him. Yeah. And the whole HDB thing we're talking about, people were happy living in their atap houses, and he gave the speech, we are now it's a swamp, we'll become a metropolis, never fear, right? So you do need that kind of quality to be able to bring the population with you when you want to make big changes. And I think that's one reason why Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has become front runner as well, because during COVID, he was very calm, he was very collected, he managed to bring the people with him during a very difficult time, and that's not an easy thing to do. So you need to have both qualities.
Speaking of which, something that we just saw him publish at the time of filming today was that he was addressing the sentiment that a lot of what was announced during budget was to favour the PAP for the election.
Yeah. Was it election budget? Yeah, that was the thing. And I found it extremely refreshing.
And what did he say?
He came out to say that the timing maybe seems, but if it seems generous to you, it is because we have managed the money well, the budget well, so we are able to. However, all this SG60 package and all that stuff only constitute to 5% of the budget, and 95% of it is.
I think it's no shame to say it's an election budget. End of term.
So that's politicizing taxpayer.
No. But
entire country's budget.
But again, I would like to point out that every end of the term budget everywhere in the world is an election budget.
That's the benefit of being incumbent.
You will find that the incumbent at the last budget before the elections, they will be extra generous. Yeah. It's just
it has to be.
Yeah, it's just a fact of life.
Yeah, right.
Money is one of the only tradable resource that we have. During COVID, I was helping our government try to get medical supplies. Yeah. Right. And even in China, we found that Singapore kept getting bumped down the list for ventilators. Even Malaysia was getting bumped up because we were strategically unimportant, right? We don't have natural resources. We have nothing to offer. In a crisis, people are very transactional. In a country that we don't have resources, we only have cash. So what we did, and we actually did this, we actually overpaid. And that's because we have a huge financial surplus. So maybe you are Malaysia, you are America, you are trying to give him something, and he says, I have palm oil, blah, blah, blah. If you do the deal with me, I'll give you 5 years concession in palm oil. I'll come to you and say, listen, I know that is what the deal is giving you. I give you cash right now. I'll give you 20% more cash than what he's giving you. You give it to me now.
All that you mentioned, together with America being increasingly focused on self-preservation, I mean, good for them, really. Is there a message out there for Singaporean voters?
I think there is. In international relations, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests, right? So we need to be very practical about it. We need to make ourselves relevant. Only way to make ourselves relevant is to be rich. We need to be rich. Right? I say, you, I'm rich. Right?
You money.
Yeah, we don't have oil, we don't have lithium, we don't have graphite, but I got money. So how? Wait,
your laugh is a bit sinister.
It's got the dollar sign in between it.
You see, like, that's a normal laugh.
It's the laugh of a rich man.
It's true.
That's when I go past 6th Avenue, I hear this laugh.
It's the Holland Bukit Timah JiaJia.
But I think the defense minister recently said that the US is moving away from being the policeman, right?
Yeah.
So you think we should cozy up to?
No, we have always tried to balance powers, right? We have never tried to cozy up. We are a very practical country, right? Current movements are a lot more aligned to Western interests because they are the predominant power. Most of our military equipment is from the US. The 7th Fleet docks here and stuff like that. If this changes in future, then the balance of power might change, and we have to be pragmatic about it, right? We have to be self-preserving too.
We don't know what happens on nomination day, right? But let's say the opposition does feel enough to form government. If they win, will you be concerned about foreign policy?
Well, it depends on which opposition party.
Let's say the Workers' Party.
If it's Workers' Party, I'm not too concerned.
Chance, right?
Because they are a moderate party. Right, I think in the last election, I think to his eternal regret, Vivian said that whatever PAP does, they take one step to the left, right?
PAP light.
The PAP light. So I don't think much will change. Yeah.
I want to spend a bit of time talking about strategies. So like in 2015, for example, the opposition party spent a lot of time talking about CPF, for example. What do you think 2025?
Which opposition party?
I mean, I think maybe like RP or like one of those.
Little ones,
right?
The
little ones, right? What in terms of anticipating what would be like the main talking points? Like, what do you think?
Are you going to censor out those stuff?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure. You can shit on kind of all you want.
No, as in, you want us to beep it out or you want us to remove it?
Actually, I would like you to leave it.
Yeah, we'll leave it as is then. We'll leave it as is.
No, so I don't know who was talking about this CPF stuff. I mean, I think the populist parties would probably PSP. The PSP
PV maybe.
Yeah, PV. Damn as well, right? It's like
to set the tone for the upcoming election. It's like
I think the tone is perfectly set. So in terms of like,
so I'm more interested in what Workers' Party says,
Sure.
what the PSP says,
Of
what
course.
even the SDP says, right? Whatever I think about Chee Soon Juan, he has really tried very hard, right? That actually isn't a reason to give him a vote. Otherwise, Southampton will be top of the league, right? So, but
the irony is at their bottom.
yeah, so
I understand.
we need. So we need to focus on the bigger parties, right?
Understood.
Yeah.
So something that happened in 2023 was that 3778, the PAP government repealed it while reinforcing traditional definition of marriage in what seemed to be an attempt to kind of please both sides. Do you think that was politically good for PAP?
It's very hard to say. It kind of cancels out, right? So like the liberals will find it
Not good enough.
Insufficient.
Yeah,
right? They might say, oh, it's good enough, but the religious
Conservatives.
that's a nice word, would actually be against it.
You think you're saying extremist?
No, fair enough, because I think to some extent liberals were happy, but there were other liberals that saying that's not far enough. We need more.
This kind of issues you cannot win. So you just have to put your pulse on the electorate vein, or rather artery, to be scientific more.
Yeah.
You need to see what kind of compromise society needs to make. But I don't think we have reached a stage where these cultural issues are make or break yet, right? People are not going to vote on single issues.
That issue surprised me quite a bit.
There will be people who vote for single issues, and I think it's not only this issue. I think there would be Malay Muslims who are very upset about the whole Israel-Gaza thing, right? So for them, that might be a predominant issue. So it's very hard to
Who
see.
to vote for then, for that community?
I don't know.
We got to see what the parties, what policies, manifestos they come up with, right?
Exactly.
See their foreign policy,
Yeah.
what they're trying to say. How much can you swing as Singapore?
Yeah, but I think
Fairly
Singaporeans so
inconsequential.
far, we are very bread and butter, and
Yeah.
we are not single issue voters. I mean, not many of
Foreign-
us.
Yeah, foreign policy.
Right?
Yeah, and I think there's also the other portion where there are people that maybe are in Sengkang GRC, for example, who might be PAP leaning, but feel like actually it's our responsibility to keep WP, these people in with their seats so that they are opposition voices in Parliament. And I think that there's some people who are like that.
Sengkang leans young family.
Yeah.
So, are you really going to gamble with your, as a vulnerable group, right?
There's young
Full
family, but there's also young lah.
Yeah, and also young.
Yeah.
So they're still young, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that was Jake grew up by PAP. They put 4 upicks, right, in the last election to go and fight.
Not that old.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
Encik was fairly youngish, but okay. Yeah. He has an upper face lah, maybe. Something that was missing from 2020 that I think was sorely missed, at least for me, was rallies, physical rallies. And they're going to make a return in 2025, we think. Do you think that helps PAP more or opposition?
Actually, in the world of modern technology, I don't see the use of rallies.
Really? You think so?
No, I mean, unless you're standing right in front, you can't even hear what the fucker is saying, right?
No lah, have lah. It's the stadium lah.
Because if we look at 2015, the rallies
But it's
were
like- it's like
extremely
a-
popular in 2015.
Yeah, but people got nothing better to do, so they go to the rallies, right?
I
It's
mean,
like
can I
going
admit
to
that I've
a-
never been to a rally?
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I've been. I was brought to a PAP rally and then I was brought to an SDP one with Dr. Cheng.
Right.
So I think this is very personal. I mean, I've attended, but I don't think I'll go to a rally, right? I mean, because it might rain, you can end up standing in the mud, right? And there are all these like Portaloos.
Sure.
Yeah, disgusting.
Sure.
I think you're showing your age.
Yeah, a little bit.
To be honest. I'm not going to He showed it a little bit.
It's true.
But I feel like the younger crowd.
I'd rather
Like,
sit at home and watch, right?
Yeah.
like we do like the live event, the whole thing. And I think the parties might surprise us.
Yeah.
I think they may like do some crazy stuff live
You're right.
to capture the young crowd.
So you've been to a PAP rally. Was it boring as shit? In my case,
I'll be
super
honest,
boring. Very
I was
sterile.
quite young. I was well under voting age. I was very
Right.
young. To me, it felt a bit sterile. It felt
Yeah.
like everyone was there
No, but-
doing the motions.
But do people even go to PAP rallies?
Oh, it looked a bit fairly filled up.
No,
as filled up as like Bishan Stadium can get one.
Right.
It's not gonna.
I think they booked the
It's
venue
not Old
according
Trafford,
to
right?
the-
Okay.
So it comes down to personal, but I think the PAP will be at a disadvantage because people already know what a PAP wants to say.
So they
right?
tend to go for the
Yeah,
opposition.
so I think the most hilarious was in 2015. Teo Selak ran out of things to say, so he started to shout the name of himself, started to shout the name of his
Oh, that's crucial.
GRC mates, you know.
No.
Just a couple of quick fire questions, if you could just indulge us, lowbrow stuff. What is one policy that's out there? What's one policy change that you push for?
Okay, I think that Singapore should actually introduce some form of wealth tax. I think right now it's very difficult to introduce wealth taxes because the wealthy are highly mobile, but our wealth taxes now, other than property tax, is basically zero. And a lot of high net worth individuals don't make earned income, which means that they don't pay a lot of taxes except for GST. In the past, we used to saying that we need to benchmark ourselves with Hong Kong because, as long as Hong Kong is zero, we need to be zero. But I think Hong Kong is losing its shine last year because of China. We can afford to maybe raise wealth tax by a little bit,
Okay. What do you think is one thing that the opposition party does really well?
Or the Workers' Party does very well.
The Workers' Party right now is very good with social media and with PR, right? People might disagree with me, but I think when Pritam stepped down to step up very quickly, I think that was very smooth. It was very, very slick.
It's a soundbite he almost wanted to get out there.
In the
It felt like
last
he rehearsed it.
in the last election, their social media was far ahead in quality of the PAP as well.
Yeah, we saw that. I think their video, when it hit the internet, everyone was like, wow.
On that note, we've invited a lot of opposition leaders. Notably, the WP leaders have not accepted our invitation to come on the show. What do you think is the exposure for them?
They are behaving strategically, which is correct. And even in business, you would do the same, right? Because you are in a leading position, a little bit more risk averse.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to put a foot wrong. You want to make sure that you focus.
And what's one thing that you think the PAP does better than anybody else?
I think they're very good at recovering from their mistake.
Okay.
Right? So whenever there is something that goes wrong, they pivot very fast. So in 2011, they pivoted to 2015. A lot of things, they went back to retail politics. They kind of bin their white paper on population.
Yeah.
Right? They made the EPs and S passes stricter. The PAP is actually a very reactive party. In more mature political systems, parties have their niche.
Yeah.
But because they have been dominant for so long, they are a broad church. So they try to appeal to everyone. But because they try to appeal to everyone, they're able to kind of like react very fast.
And what's quite interesting is that I think it's very hard to kind of place them
Yeah.
in a position because they take what's good from the left, they take what's good from the right almost.
And at the end of the day, Singapore is about retail politics, right? So
What does that mean?
It means that you need to go door to door and knock.
Right.
It's hard work on the ground. The Workers' Party is actually very good at that, right? These things that we are doing, it might affect some swing voters, it might affect some demographics. But we are actually a very bread and butter. We are a retail politics people. We want to see people work hard for you on the ground. And actually, that's why the PAP was successful all of these years, right? So they have never relied on PR. They have not relied on publicity, on marketing. The reason why, if you look at the history, why they are wearing short sleeves, all white, is that they wanted to show the people that I'm going to roll out my sleeves, I'm going to work for you. They have actually focused on retail politics, on actually working for the people instead of all the sound and thunder, what is smooth, what is sleek. So I think the Workers' Party is very smart. Even in business, if you see that the incumbent is doing things right, you want to copy the strong parts. So they know that the PAP has made that work. So they are copying the parts that actually made it work, like how Lau Tia Kiang stepped down before he was forced to retire. He didn't cling on to power, right? He made sure there's a smooth transition, and that's what the PAP has been trying to do. So the Workers' Party has been very good at copying the right parts of what the PAP is doing and then trying to give a bit of a differentiation to say, hey man, give us a chance and vote for us. So I think not coming on to this podcast as well is just being safe, right?
Yeah.
Not yet, we'll invite again.
And then the smaller parties have nothing to lose, right? They're going to go on any Mickey Mouse podcast. What do they have to lose? Not that you are not on Mickey Mouse podcast, I'm just saying that.
No, sure, good.
Yeah, fantastic
You
answer.
have said before that Workers' Party slate of candidates nowadays wouldn't look out of place on the PAP's slate.
Yeah.
I think you've said that before about the Gerald, that whole group of guys who went through. Yeah. So
And then they're going to have a senior council that's probably going to run, right?
Yes.
So I think they are copying exactly what the PAP is doing, right? So that they get highly qualified professionals. So we say we are as good as the PAP now. Give us a chance.
Yeah.
And people will give them a chance.
Now, if I were to flip the question with PAP, right, to a certain extent, it's once again, like you mentioned, it's theirs to lose. One thing that I think the PAP did last election was they try and spread this narrative of vote for who you want to govern. Don't vote for check and balance because that's not fair. Because if everyone, we all want check and balance. If we all vote check and balance,
This is true.
then opposition wins.
I think there's a problem with the first past the post system.
You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Do we want check and balance? Yes, I want check and balance.
Yeah.
So now I will vote check and balance equals to vote for opposition. Then
So
suddenly they win.
I have two things to say
How do we
about
overcome that?
One is that it is true that we should always vote for who wants to govern, right? Because if you don't, then the ruling party will change. And the second thing is to do with the Westminster system as well. In political science, we call in the Westminster system, it's actually an elected dictatorship. There's no check and balance, especially in a unicameral system. Because one party under the party whip would always push legislation through.
Yeah.
There's no check and there's no balance. Workers' Party can talk as much as they want, they will still lose.
Yep.
So there's no check and there's no balance. This is very different from the American system where the party whip has to go around making sure that everybody votes according to the party. So you'll see sometimes the Republicans taking the side of the Democrats, the Democrats taking the side of the Republicans. So our political system in itself doesn't allow check and balance. It's different if, let's say, we are a bicameral system. Let's say we have two houses. Then the two houses check and balance each other. So this whole check and balance things, I think, is very misunderstood and is actually overplayed, right? So I think it's more of having a choice.
So what you're saying is the ideal system where a check balance would matter would not be the first past the post system.
I would say that in all the political systems, a unicameral Westminster system has the least check and balances. And these check and balances might have to come from outside the political system. So from civil society, right? And I think I really hope that our civil society can grow. So within the 4 or 5 years where there is an elected dictatorship, not only the political parties but everybody can put pressure on the ruling party. And what I'm saying is actually quite controversial, not to you because you are too young, but because Lee Kuan Yew actually said, he's quoted an author called Catherine Lim, right? She wrote some articles and she said that if you want to comment, get into the fray, join politics. And that was the OB markers for a very long time, that if you want to fight the government, you need to be a politician.
Right.
A mature democracy doesn't work like that. The checks and balances must come from the whole of society, which means that as active citizenry, we need to check the government within the period of its term and not only exercise our democratic right once every 5 years.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And so thank you so much to Calvin for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see you next one. Like, share, subscribe. Bye-bye.
Yeah. I might probably want to ban alcohol. Right?
Completely.
Yeah, completely. Because I don't drink, and I think that it is also a drug.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You drink? Okay.
Is that racist?
I just got racially profiled.
Because he was
What
You reacted very strongly.
You guys see how much you all drank in Chinese New Year?
Yeah. No. We're not defending you.